Short intro. Where are you? Here we are. Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted best of the web 2 years running. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved immortal beings, and good-looking people. Remember, you're good-looking because you're always looking for and finding the good. We have good in abundance in some of the most beautiful, bountiful, brainy beings on the planet. Okay, I'll join in there as well. And we're going to talk about this institution, which is under assault. That's ASSAULT, under assault from the negative forces in the Western world that are trying to tear down the greatest institution, the most stable, the most productive, the most powerful, and they're doing it with every weapon at their disposal, which includes telling things that are not true. Now, we combat all that by using the greatest weapon in the world, which is truth. And we do it with people who live the life of joy in marriage. And it's important to understand that that is really the essence of what marriage is about. Marriage is a unique institution. It's been in the Western world for thousands of years. Actually, I'll say it even better. It's been in the world of human beings for millennia. And it has withstood the test of time. It's been under assault numbers of times over the past 200 or 300 years, especially during the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Communist Revolution, and any revolution that is anchored in anti-God ideas. Because the idea of marriage is God-centered. And when you have people who are not, then they want to tear down this precious institution, which brings about benefit for everybody, because it brings about that which is most dear to people, which are, I like being happier, healthier, and wealthier. That's what happens when you have marriage with joy. You are actually happier, and I'm talking about in every aspect of life, healthier in every aspect of life, physically, mentally, and spiritually, and wealthier in every aspect of life, certainly in coin of the realm, but as well as in all the other things that go along with wealth. So the ability to be happier, healthier, and wealthier is an absolute byproduct, a result of a marriage with joy. Now, I would like to say that we are in favor of, I'm speaking for myself, by the way, in favor of marriage between a man and a woman. However, I am speaking again for myself, open to any marriage that really brings two people together, not more than two, not three, not five, not eight, not 10 at the same time, but two people together in what we'll call holy matrimony, in the sense that they are joined together for the furtherance of each other's growth, because that's really what marriage is about. It is a mechanism that enables people to feel completely, totally safe. I read recently, somebody said the exact quote, I'm not saying it correctly, but that you're willing to put yourself in the hands of another person with everything about you that could cause you to die if they wanted to, and yet you trust them implicitly. That's really what marriage is about. That ability to live sanctified in a wonderful giving and receiving mechanism. Now, today we're going to be discussing two interesting topics. We are au courant, so we'll be discussing TikTok. And I don't mean the TikTok that was in the belly of the crocodile in Peter Pan. Am I dating myself? I guess so. I just realized I brought back a memory from when I was 8 or 9 years old, maybe even, I'm probably even younger, and then seeing on television TikTok in the belly of the crocodile in the Peter Pan story. Okay, but this is TikTok, TIK, TOK. What's happening right now in the United States of America and the possibility of banning it certainly for people under the age of 14. It's an interesting dilemma. And we're also going to be talking about a survey that was just done by the Pew Research Center. Pew is P-E-W, not another kind of pew. And I sent out the information, and I hope and trust that everybody received it, because it talks about what parents prioritize in their desire for their children. So let's talk about that other before we go to our panel. That children are almost always a result of a marriage situation. Now, by the way, by definition, sometimes people are infertile. Sometimes people are able to adopt. Sometimes people can do surrogate relationships. There are many ways to raise children. And even people who are in a marriage who do not have biological children oftentimes are great, wonderful role models for young people. Let's be blunt. You don't have to have a biological child or children to be a role model as an adult for younger people, because that's really what an adult is. It might not, you can correct me, my panel, if you say I'm wrong on this, but an adult is that being that lives in such a way that others, especially younger people, say, I would like to model myself after that person, those people, et cetera, because they do live a more meaningful life. They're happier, they're healthier, and they're wealthier. So I'm just going to jump right in and just first of all introduce our amazing panel. We have up there in the great Northwest, just recently back from a wonderful vacation in southern Mexico, soaking up the sun while the rest of the Northwest was piled up with snow. Wonderful Dr. Diane Medved. Yeah. And we also have in the lower extremity of the United States, down in the East Coast, in the Florida and on the Gulf side, the Gulf side, the western part, yes. Wonderful ambassador of happiness, wonderful Maura Sweeney. And we have holding down the West Coast in the southern part of the West Coast, in Manhattan Beach, fabulous wife expert Lori McDermott. And of course, exiled out into the desert is your host, humble host, Barry Shore in Henderson, Nevada. So we're here because people like to hear what we have to say. Isn't that amazing? It's always fun to say that, but this is, I think, our third year now, and there are thousands of people around the world that listen to what we have to say. They find it fascinating, as do I, by the way. I mean, I'm talking a lot right now, but I prefer listening to what you have to say. So we're going to jump right in and ask Diane to lead off, as she always does, and does it very, very well, with something that I sent. And Diane, did you receive that which I sent to you by email?
I did.
Okay, I hope you had a chance to open it up. Let me just, if I was really good at what I was doing, let me see if I can. Bear with me. Present, slides, share screen. Let me just try here. Sharing screen. Okay, share screen. Inbox, maybe Einstein can info. Let's go inbox, share. No, but I want to share this. Oh, Mr. Shore, you are pretty cool. Let's see if he does it. Kids, can you see me?
I see you.
Yes.
You can see me. Okay. Well, I think I did it. Okay, so I have the PDF up on the screen. The question is, can you all see the PDF?
We're looking at your open Gmail account, but not your specific image. Can you open up the one email?
Yeah, you can't see that. Okay, well, I tried. I mean, I can see it. You can't. And, well, we'll just go back to,
you
I'll
might
read
need
it.
this.
That's it.
Okay, well, okay, we don't want... Now the question is, how do we get a stop screen? Okay. Yeah, oh, you have it. Okay. Thank you, Diane. She be amazing. Okay. Leadoff batter. Would you please hold that up for a moment? And here you have this wonderful Pew Research. And okay, it's a big chart. And let me read it off, and then we'll ask Diane the question. So this is parents prioritize financial stability, job satisfaction for the children when they reach adulthood. This is talking about the percentage of parents that really want their children to achieve as adults. And the number one and number two on here are at 88% are to be financially independent and to have jobs or careers they enjoy. Earning a college degree is 41%. Getting married is 21%. And having children coming in last, dead last, is at 20%
Also.
of parents want their children to have children. So you can put that down now, Diane. So the question to you is the following. Did this in any way, I don't want to use the word shock, but did in any way, is this unexpected from your perspective?
Off the top of my head, I always like to go to the original study, which I did completely print out and read. And the thing that really makes a difference is how the question is asked. And in this case, it's what priorities do parents have for their children? In other words, what's important to the parents
Right.
for the children to have achieved? And I think in our culture, the way that it works, not to sort of take some blame away from what seems at first glance to be shocking, is the idea that we hope that we've raised our children so that they can make their own decisions. And so that they can then choose whether they want to have a spouse, or if they have a good enough spouse with whom to choose to have a child. There are a lot of things that are somewhat within a person's control, but somewhat not in one's control. But whether one is financially independent, able to make a living, it doesn't say how. It just says, it takes a big burden off a parent to know that that child, when the parent is gone, will be able to be self-sufficient. And that's why I think that comes in at number one. And I think the idea at the same amount of importance is to have a career or job the child enjoys. So it isn't just that they want self-sufficiency for the child. They want the child to be fulfilled. Now, everything else stems from that. And I think we're making too much of it if we say, well, only 20% of parents want their kids to get married, or only 20% of parents want their kids to have children. I'm sure they love their kids to have children as well. But I think above that, the majority of their lives is determined by what do you do in life? What do you become in life? And this is such a very broad question that what you do and what you become is folded into it. And I think that's the root of everything. It would be nice if people said, oh yeah, I want my kid to grow up and get married and have kids. But a lot of the parents who are answering this are people who were told, I want you to grow up, get married, and have kids. And their parents may have gotten divorced. There are a lot of people, especially the ones who would be answering this questionnaire, which is parents of children under 18, whose parents got divorced. And given that likely background for many of them, I think that they would answer this question in the way they did. So you asked, was I surprised? Not when I sort of dug in and looked at what the question looked like. It was so broad and it was so unspecific that, yes, I think every parent wants their child to be self-sufficient and fulfilled in their career. And I think from that, a lot of things stem and flow, and that there are certain differences among ethnic groups and among different types of backgrounds about who said what. And, I wish that our culture unanimously thought that marriage was the first thing that people should do, because I think that marriage is the thing from which all others stem. But I can certainly understand this. And if you ask me, am I surprised? No.
So I'm in agreement with you. There was one piece of this, though, that I found fascinating. And again, if this was Barry Shore Research Center, okay. This is Pew. Pew is not a small group. And, everything has a bias, let's be blunt. It depends how you ask questions and such like that. But generally speaking, this particular research organization tends to be trying to elicit information about what's happening in society. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. I was surprised, not about the children. I was surprised about marriage, about getting married. In other words, yes. Do you want your children to not to be children, to be adults? Do you want to raise children that are adults that are financially independent? Well, I would think that would be number one anyway. I would agree with that. The idea of having a job or career they enjoy, to me, they seem to be hand in glove. The ability, though, to be married, this is something that I think is less desired in our society today, well, certainly than 20 years ago, and not even to even in the same breath talk about 50 or 70 years ago. It's just, it's a different environment.
But that's why it's not surprising. And now cohabitation is just as acceptable as being married, and also having children out of wedlock, which used to be the term. Now nobody would say that because it would be an insult. So it's just as legitimate to not be married and stay with somebody for a long time and cohabit, and to have children without marriage. And so that's why they've dropped in the importance to parents. And remember, these are younger people. They have kids at home under age 18. So it's not the older generation. These are people who are raised, again, with a lot of divorce, with a lot of cohabitation, with a lot of kids born out of wedlock who are perfectly loved and acceptable. There's no such thing as an illegitimate child.
Correct.
Child is legitimate. And I think this may be reflecting that. And yes, marriage is a great thing. If you were to ask people, the most recent polls asking people, do you ever want to be married in your life? Do you want marriage for yourself? 90% of respondents say yes. And ultimately, they want that in their lives. But this is a different question.
So you're right. Well, let's go to this question you just mentioned. If it's true, and I'll believe you, that 90%, it seems a bit high to me, want to be married, it also seems that people are not becoming married more. In other words, oh yeah, I'd like that if I find the right person, or if this happened, that. But in other words, as part of what I want in my life, what I'm seeking as something that would help me grow and that I would really like to have happen, well, people go and invest a lot of time and money into perfecting their golf swing. I mean, I'm not being funny when I say this. People invest time and money in practicing their golf swing and their putting and things like that. If they put the same amount of time into saying, I'm going to join a group, and because I'd like to get married. Well, I don't see people doing that. I hear the lip service.
What about all these marriage apps? When coffee meets bagel. There's all kinds of swipe right, swipe left. And then you see in the New York Times, and they met on Tinder. I think that ultimately people do want to not just hook up, want to find a life's mate. But I think that we're also taught at the same time that we should feel good about just being by ourselves, about being who we are and developing.
So this is very good. Okay, so this
messages and this question reflect that.
This is excellent, because this is part of what I took out of this, that what I extracted from this is that people do feel comfortable in their own skin, which, by the way, let's also be blunt, 20, 50, 70 years ago was less common. People did not feel that they could be, in quotation marks, alone and feel that they're human still. What do you mean? What do you mean you're not married? So, wonderful, Maura, did this in any way surprise you, shock you, or anything else when you saw the results?
Yes, and I want to thank and credit Diane for doing her homework, because we only got the image of what the results showed, and several things shocked me and other things didn't. When I looked at getting married, only 21% of the parents wanted their kids to get married. That and having children at 20% struck me as if, like, wow, is it that low of a priority? But when considered with the rest of the story, it makes sense. I'll say a few things. The number one and number two, I can see in this era why that would be such an issue among parents when considering their children. And I'm glad they were filed together. Number one, to be financially independent, and number two, to have jobs or careers they enjoy. Now, when I heard that, what came to mind was happiness. These are parents that want to know, first and foremost, let's say, in today's environment, today's culture, today's economy, and specifically in today's economy, which is so, I'm going to say, uncertain, having children grow up to be in an environment, to be self-sufficient, not only to be able to have a job that brings in an income that supports them, but secondly, and I thought this was very interesting, they ranked exactly the same, 88%. And you know, I'm the ambassador of happiness. I was so glad to see that they wanted to see their children doing things that they would put their effort toward that they really enjoyed. Because whenever you're happy in something, you end up extending that feel in every other aspect of life. You get along better with others. You can think more clearly. You have more energy. You're healthier minded. You're more creative. Your whole life feels better and healthier. So I was very glad to see those two. And I saw it as extremely practical, which I gather is what the parents were thinking about. When I looked down and I saw the references to married and children, but let me stop right there. Earning a college degree, that caught me because I always follow culture, economy kind of closely. I have for decades. Do you know back in the 50s, 60s, that was one's ticket? And think about family lines. That was always the ticket to your financial independence, to a career, and to a certain standard of living. If you could go to college and get a degree, you were lifting yourself to an arena in life where you would not have to worry about finances. The interesting thing that struck me about 41%, I thought it was striking a note about how less effective or less true the college degree is in terms of connecting one's financial independence with an academic background. So that was rather interesting, but I thought it was very current, and I thought it was quite accurate, because I know that there were a lot of other people that thought, oh, you've got to do it, go all out, get the degree. And what would happen is frequently a lot of these families and the kids would invest a lot of money and a lot of their future income on getting certain degrees, especially from private universities. And they'd never be financially independent because what they thought they were going to get out of that degree and the cost it incurred was never going to be paid off properly. So that I wanted to say. But as far as the marriage side and the children, I want to go back in time. There was an era where, you know, I can remember when I started college like late 70s. And I remember, and I was at a co-ed college and I was there to get a degree. I was there for school. I was not there to get married. And I remember people referring to an MRS degree. Now, this is late 70s. And they were looking at me and they said, "Oh, are you here for an MRS?" I said, what kind of a master's is an MRS? They said, "You don't know? That's your degree to get married." Years ago, I didn't know.
MRS. Hello. Thank you. Yes,
So
Mrs.
in other words, a
Thank you.
woman would go to
Right.
college
I
with
get
the
it. Very
okay.
good.
Now, that was very interesting, and I would say at some level it was rather demeaning to a woman to say that your only ticket to a future, to having any sense of, let's say, nobility or respect in society, would be having a husband. I could remember when my aunt turned 30 years old when I was a little girl, and she was not yet married. She was working in Manhattan, and she did not find the right husband yet. And it was like, oh, everybody came to her birthday party in black. Now that whole
Wait a minute.
like they were going to
That
a
was very
funeral.
funny. Yeah, that was very funny, Maura.
But it was true. They actually
No,
did, and they were all
I hear
crying
it.
for it. So here's the point that I look at, and these are some good things. I look at everything from the past, and I try to pick out what's best from the past and look at what's best about today. I will remember an era where even with the music, everything in the culture was, if you didn't have a mate, if you were not dating somebody in high school, if you were not married early on, there was something wrong with you. whether it was men or women, you couldn't get the upper level jobs if you were not married. You couldn't go to social events if you were not married. So there was a great stigma. When I looked at that, I saw it as a positive in that we now accept everyone as they are. And who's the one that said feeling comfortable in their own skin? Was it you, Barry, or was it you, Lori? But the idea of I'm comfortable in and of myself, and my goal would be, or a joy for me in life would be to find someone who shares my values, that I do trust, that we can build a life with together. And that is a wonderful combination. So looking at all of this, and the way in which, when you break down the question, I would say in light of today, it makes perfect sense. If you were to look at only the respondents, the percentages, you'd probably get a skewed response. But I would say yes. In the case of my daughter, I was not looking for her to get married. I wanted her to be able to support herself, feel comfortable in her own skin, be an adult, as opposed to a child who just happened to find a husband and then somebody was taking care of her.
So this is really important. Both you and Diane are bringing out wonderful ideas that, and that's one of the reasons I sent this to you, because I know it was not going to just stay there static. This is excellent. You're bringing out this whole, this movement of oneself and not being dependent, not being an MRS or even an MR.
Right, right.
Yes. That there is the fluidity of being in, let's call this though, a solid, stable relationship, and that the result of that is that you're happier, healthier, and wealthier. And if children come, so be it. And if they don't, if that's not what you want, so be it as well. This is we're a very open, permissive society, and I want to say permissive in the positive sense, not permissive in the outlandish sense. In other words, the ability for people to really find some things that make them the best they can be, whether it's a rocket scientist. I'll just tell you, I'm going to ask Lori to speak. So I'm a devotee of reading the Wall Street Journal, and there's oftentimes very fascinating personal articles. There was one recently about a amazing woman who was the first, I'm sorry to say, I can't remember exactly what her specialty was in a very unique scientific field. And it was about the entire article, which was 3 pages, by the way, long article. She couldn't get lab time, and she was at MIT. This was in the late 50s, early 60s. She couldn't get lab time because she was woman. And you read this stuff and okay, look, I'm a guy, so I felt it, but I didn't feel it. But you read letters to the editors that came in over the next few days, a week or so, and people were saying, yes, this happened to me, because it was a different culture, and it was not an encouraging culture per se. We are today a much more encouraging culture, a much more permissive, and again, in the positive sense. And I think that's absolutely tremendously wonderful. That there should be a person called a woman who's a scientist is no different than a man is a scientist. Duh. But there was at one time this thing that, well, women were not rocket scientists. Well, they were, but they had to be in the background taking stenography. I mean, it was bizarre, but it's true. Okay, wonderful, Lori. I don't know if you had a chance to look at this, the piece here. Can we hear? I think we can't hear you.
Sorry.
Oh, there you are. Okay, wonderful, Lori.
I've had just, my phone is kind of going a little crazy.
Is he financially independent yet?
Who?
Your son?
No, not at all.
Okay.
In fact, that's the whole thing about marriage. And when all my kids are like, I am never getting married.
Now, by the way, Lori deals with specifically people who are going through issues, mostly either heading toward divorce or trying not to, but she deals with a lot of women who are not financially independent. They are financially dependent, and that causes a crisis, doesn't it, Lori?
Oh, so much so. Yeah. So, Barry, there's a lot of things to talk about here. Can you nail it down for one for me?
Yes, but first of all, would you like to tell everybody how wonderful it was that you saw me and we were together at the LA Convention Center?
Yeah, Barry sends out this email about he's going to be at the LA Convention Center, and I was like, you didn't tell me? Like, why would you not? Like, he's going to be there. I'm like, it was just like a mass email. I'm like, well, of course I have to go. So Sunday I trucked down there and heard him speak and did this thing for his book. And I got a couple of cards, which I'm so excited about. I love this one. This one's my favorite too. You know why I like this one? These are the colors on my website. And I was like, oh, I love this. And
Here's a card that reads joy, happiness, peace, and love.
Yes, and I got your book on acronyms and I've been using it. And I just think they're just so wonderful. And there's a lot you can do with that, but that's another story.
Okay.
So narrow it down for what question.
So narrow it down to one thing.
Because there's a lot here.
Did you open this up? Did you have a chance? Okay.
I did. So let's give you my
anyway. Were you shocked or amazed or you just said, okay, that's the way it is?
Well, in my head, I'm thinking, no, you want everyone married. And then I'm like, no, I don't. Like I as a mother, I agree with that. I would have done the same thing. I want my kids financially set. My daughter is dating someone who didn't go to college. And when I sit down and I say to him, I mean, he's a wonderful man. He's young, under 21. And I say, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And he goes, yeah, I don't know. And I'm like, okay. Do you have an idea? Like, you want to stay in the restaurant business? And he's like, I don't know. And he's not worried about it. My daughter knows exactly what she wants to do, where she wants to go. And I think at some point, if she's going this way, he's going to get left behind. And so I've said to her, is he someone that could be a contender for marriage? Because I don't care. She can marry whoever she wants. And she's like, I don't know. I don't think I want to get married. And okay, so it's just this different thing. But what I care about is that she's going to be okay. Because I don't think our kids are going to be as successful as we are. I don't think they'll ever have the heyday that we did where, money was just coming in, or my parents. But I don't know. And all I know is that I want my kids to be okay. Like if I were to die tomorrow. So that's really important to me. The other things, if they get married, I don't want them to be alone. I think it's a good idea to have a partner. I don't think it should be until you're 30, 35. But then you got to start banging out those kids before those things start up. So we want to make sure we give some time for that. But I do think marriage is part of the journey that helps us live longer versus living a life as a single person. And if you end up single, you can have a very fulfilling life, but it is, I don't know, I go back to our purpose of why we're here. And I think I believe we're here to kind of grow. And if you are always by yourself, like when I was in college, I got scared dating a guy who lived by himself because I was like, he doesn't have any skills to negotiate because he puts his toothpaste there. And when he comes back, it's there. Mm-hmm. And I want someone who's got a bunch of roommates. Where's this? And they're just like flexible. So I don't like, people need to live with other people and be flexible. I think that's really important. So yeah, I do believe in marriage. I just think in the beginning, we got to make sure you're on a financial step to go someplace and then find someone you love and marry them and stay committed. That's a challenge.
So this is really wonderful. The three of you are in agreement, based on what I'm hearing, that finances and fulfillment in a career or a job or whatever that is a major priority. And I think you hit on a little bit more, but I'll expand. You said in today's economy. And on some level, today's economy, of course, is different than it was, let's say, 70 years ago or 50 years ago. And yet not. I'll tell you why I say not. Because it was always people striving to be financially, leave a word aside, the word independent, financially capable, owning a home, having income, cash flow, and things like that. Yes, I think that there are unique constraints in today's world. We are a country, certainly, that almost demands two incomes. Mm-hmm. Almost. Mm-hmm. If you want to live a life where there are things that you can do, let's say have vacations and do things like that. Usually one income is not sufficient. That's just in terms of money. But the more important aspect of income is that there's a job that you train for, that you like, that you enjoy doing. Let's say whether it's coaching or helping people, writing books, talk show host, whatever it is that you're contributing, because that's really the essence of the human, isn't it? What is it that I'm doing to contribute and being part of the community? What can I give? So as we said before, I took the example of the woman who was a PhD, and she couldn't even get lab time at MIT. Again, this goes back in the late 60s and such. And you read this and it hurts because she wasn't able to give. So we talk about STEM in school, and STEM is usually what? It's science and technology, engineering, mathematics, and it oftentimes more geared towards bringing more women into STEM, let's say, than men, because it seemed to be there was more usual. But it's really about, where do you find a place where I can be a contributor, a giver? And I use that as the jumping off point because I think that's an essential aspect of what marriage is really about. So you said it, Lori, very nicely. A guy, usually guys, and they live alone, and they actually live alone. Sometimes they're lonely, but you're right. The toothpaste is there in a certain way, and they put it down, and they don't have to even being concerned that somebody else is going to use that tube of toothpaste. It sounds so bizarre, right? But there's a concern for another being. And I think that goes back to one of the reasons we started this Marriage with Joy. It's really about, what can I do to be fulfilled in my own business, relationship to the world, and to share that with somebody else, to be able to share that with somebody else. I can think of two people right now. One is a man, one's a woman, interestingly enough, both highly successful in terms of where they are in the economy, and where they are in terms of contributing community. And I can tell you, they're wondrous people. And they, like you said, Diane, they would like to be in a long-term relationship. We'll call it marriage. And at this point in their lives, they can't. They confided to me, each one different time. They can't. They're not able to get beyond a certain thing now because they see it as giving up too much. Isn't that interesting? It comes to a point where, well, no, I don't want to give that up. That's how you feel. You feel like you're giving something up rather than I'm increasing my abilities to give. Am I being clear what I'm saying? Have you experienced that at all, Diane, and people you work with?
Not too many. Well, yeah, over the years I have. And that actually has been in case I worked mainly with people who are contemplating or on the verge of divorce. And a lot of them would say, I just can't give up so-and-so, so I'm out of here. So even in a married relationship, people have their red line where I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give that up. But when you're talking about contemplating marriage with someone you have not married before, in a sense, you have to have a leap of faith. You can't say what you're going to give up and what you're not going to give up because you haven't had that yet. And you don't know it could be the other person will say, yeah, you can do it your way. That's okay with me. But you have to be in the situation in order to find out what you're willing to give up, what you can give up, what you can negotiate, what you can have some of the time and not others of the time. Mm-hmm. So it's such a process, but you're right, Barry. The whole point of that process is that it helps you grow and it helps you give. And without that, if you're not a giver to someone that you're married to, then you're likely less a giver in other situations, other interpersonal situations.
I was just going to ask you about that because, yes, even though these two particular people I'm thinking about, one is now 56 and the other is 49. And it's interesting you say that because they're both givers and yet not, if you know what I mean. There's a little bit of, I can give, but I can't give that much. And yet, in my experience of marriage, I'm 45 years. Okay, it took me about 2 decades to learn it, but out there, give. If my wife wants something, give. That's the nature. And once you get, like you said, leap of faith, wow, something happens, magical almost. It's like rainbows every day. It's wondrous. Yes, you were going to say something wonderful, Maura.
Well, I'm just thinking that whole concept. Interesting that you could have some people, and years ago, there were people that would get married right out of high school. I mean, it wasn't really my generation, but prior to that, you get out of school, you get married, you have those kids, and they would build a life together. Today, you have people waiting longer. And I've had friends and people in my circuit that have, let's say, amassed a lot on their own. And maybe they got married, then they got divorced, then they had more, then they were thinking about getting married. It's a very interesting dynamic. Some people who, let's say, everything was the career, everything was about getting ahead and getting established. And then you're saying that there comes a time maybe when people feel like, I don't want to give things up, because they may be giving greatly in a career and flourishing there, but part of their life has actually become inflexible. And the thought that was coming to mind as I was listening is, when we get married, we learn to be flexible. Just like Lori was saying, you go to college, you've got 5 other roommates or whatever it is, you've got to get in and out of that bathroom quickly. You've got to share responsibilities. Or if you're from a big family, you learn how to share. And the operative word being flexible. You get married, and now you are sharing your life and your space with another being. And in order to have, let's say, something of a moving current of a life that works for both of you, both parties need to learn to be flexible. You have children, you learn to be even more flexible. And it's interesting in part of self-development that you can really develop yourself, and you look great, you sound great, you're smart, you're successful, your 401k and all of your savings accounts look wonderful. But personally, you may not have allowed yourself those strange places, those unfamiliar places, to grow as an individual, to grow emotionally, to grow in trust, to grow in that area of flexibility. And I guess it's an individual thing. Just one other random thought that came to mind when you were talking about these friends of yours. Sometimes when people grow so much, and this is not saying it's good, bad, or otherwise, it's like anything else, it could be a challenge. Sometimes when people build so much on their own and then they marry someone later on in life, there can be that question mark that says, are you marrying me for the right reason? Could go both ways. The wealthy person could say, well, I'm marrying somebody because they're good eye candy. And it could be both ways. But I do think that there's something to be said for being in a place in life where you allow yourself to grow, not only in the boxes that you could check off, but also those other emotional, spiritual, unusual places in life that just help you become more of a person. And that's where marriage and kids and sharing really helps.
And I think that Lori has a lot of experience with this, because those are the people you're dealing with, Lori, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah,
I have endless stories. I have lots of stories, women who, are in their 50s who they never had kids. Why? Because they ended up getting married and decided they wanted to have money, and their parents didn't have money because they had too many kids. So they're not going to have kids. They're just going to have each other. Well, one of them, they decide that when they're in their 20s, and now they're 50 something. And one of them's like, I kind of want kids. And it's usually the husband, and he finds someone younger and he wants to redo his life over again. And the wife is left going, wait, we decided we didn't want kids. Well, I want kids now. Well, she can't do that. They could adopt, but it's all of a sudden this weird dynamic that these men all of a sudden need, that they want to have kids. So it's like being flexible, right? So maybe at some point in that marriage, which they can't remember, maybe 2-3 years ago, he said, we should have had kids. And she could have said, well, what could we do about it? Instead of saying, well, we decided long ago that we weren't going to have any. And that's not being flexible. And so that can create a rift that plants a seed. So 3 years later, he's out hunting for somebody and finds someone younger. That happens a lot. I see that. The other thing I think we need to chat about is that I think today's people are much more selfish than how we were a long time ago. When I got married, it was like, well, what am I going to give my husband? And now today's people, when they're dating, they're like, well, you know, I don't like him because he doesn't give me this. And it's like, whoa, what? It's about you giving instead of taking. So I think today's society is all about, what am I going to get? What am I going to get? Where am I going to get this? And how am I going to get that? I'm going to date that guy. He's going to be rich. I'm going to date that girl because she's got a future, blah, blah, blah. Instead of going, well, what can I do for you? How can I make your life better? I don't know. I think that's something we all forget.
So this is an area I don't want to go into now, but I think this touches upon what we'll call faith-based communities, because Diane, myself, we're in a faith-based community, and there, thank God, there are still many of them around the country, but it answers, or at least it speaks to this point you just mentioned, because, and again, it goes also to the first issue here about being financially independent, having a job or a career that you really like, because it almost fuels that, what can I get? And you have a checklist of things that you want, and they may not include values. They may include things. Well, I want this kind of person, that, and they do this, and drives this car, and lives over here and such. But value-based relationships are really what we say we all care about. That's what we say, but how do we act? So it's an interesting dilemma, and I think maybe in another session or two we'll talk more about that phenomenon, because you're dealing with this on a regular basis, Lori. I mean, you're the wife expert.
Right. And so just one more side note, while we were talking at the beginning of this, I've literally had 4 people in the past 2 weeks tell me their son is trying to commit suicide. 4, not 1, not 2, 4. I had an appointment with someone at 2:00 today, and she just texted me now, sorry, I was in the ER with my son. He's 17 and he tried to commit suicide. That was at the beginning of the call. That's why I was so distracted. So 4, 2 weeks. So I feel, why do families kind of go like this? It is that that happens when there is no God. When there's no God in a marriage, families will go like this. When there is faith,
that's how we began. We began this process talking about unfortunately, in a less God-oriented society. Now, again, we're not talking about people becoming so obsessed with God that that you become incapable of smiling, which sometimes happens, by the way. The most religious people that I know, and I think Diane will back this up, are people who smile all the time. That's people who love God and God loves them. But there's also, we all know people that they grumble. Hello, that's not a God-centered environment. That's a person-centered environment, thinking that they're really God-centered. But the real key is what you're saying here, and I am so troubled by this. It hurts terribly when you're saying this, Lori, that we know statistically that, especially with teenage girls, that suicide attempts are increasing dramatically. Thank God they don't always succeed. And I'm saying this, like, please forgive me if it comes out incorrectly, but oftentimes a lot of these are a call for help, as opposed to wanting to really die. Now, there are people who want to die. There's no question that real suicide oftentimes works. But I know also of people in the past couple of years, and not 1, 2, 3, but 4 more, that used this as a means of calling out and saying, you're not listening to me. They didn't use those words, but parents sometimes can't see because they don't want to see. They're involved in finances or their career, and children were a byproduct, but they became a byproduct. So it's a society today is a very complex place. Let's be blunt. And unless and until we and ourselves instill or bring back values that are fundamental to living harmoniously in a very encouraging environment, then it becomes almost impossible to be able to raise children who will become adults. There are a lot of people out there who are still children, and they're in the advanced ages of 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, etc. I mean, we know it, right? Hello.
Yeah.
You know, I don't mind being called a kid because I'm very happy and outgoing and such like that. But people know that I'm a responsible adult also. I wanted to talk about, but we don't have the time right now, so we'll do it on the next show. There is a movement at this very moment. It's being discussed even by the President of the United States and members of Congress and such about banning TikTok for children under the age of 14. And I'm just going to give a couple data points. And if you have something to say on it in a few minutes, then we can do that. So it turns out that, do I ever access TikTok? Yes. I actually have a few thousand followers, not because I tried to, but because I posted things and people liked it. Great. But interestingly enough, I found out 2 data points just in the past 48 hours. One of them is that in China, which is obviously a communist state, somewhat dictatorial, et cetera, children under the age of 14 are not allowed to use TikTok for more than 40 minutes at a time. That's number one. Number two, interestingly enough, the information or that which is shown on TikTok in China is very different than what is shown in the United States and Western Europe. In China, most of the things that are shown on TikTok are what we would call educational. Mm-hmm. It's science-oriented, math-oriented, or talking about how to make things like ceramic bowls and things like that. Whereas here in the United States, Canada, Western Europe, it's mostly about exposing oneself. Not always, obviously, but people doing things. And it's a very different orientation. And for children especially, I think there are kids that are 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 that are using TikTok regularly. And by definition, kids, they're not going to do it for 30 minutes and put it away. You know, it is mind-numbing and addictive. Mm-hmm. So it's a discussion. Is this actually apropos for a open, permissive society to say we want to limit access for people of a certain age? So just in a couple of minutes, Diane, do you have a particular thought one way or the other? We'll do another show entirely on this.
Yeah, really briefly. I think that research shows that especially teenage girls can be deleteriously affected by watching TikTok because then they are fed subsequent videos. They go from one and then they are fed by TikTok related videos that lead them down a rabbit hole of negativity, often about body image, often about the way they look, and it leads to depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts. That clearly is a topic of discussion, but then you get to the practicality. How do you limit an individual to 40 minutes? Right. And at the same time, I think that TikTok can be for the positive, as your many followers can attest, that they can uplift you as well. Just like the internet, there's good, there's bad, there's horrific, and there's wonderful, incredible. So I think it's a very difficult problem and a question. I'm not sure that I would agree with a legislative response. I think an educational response that in schools, just like kids were cautioned against using opioids and now fentanyl and now even marijuana, they should be cautioned against using TikTok and educated as to how to be a savvy consumer so that it will uplift them and bring them to an end. I think very important is to teach the kids goal setting. What do you want to be? Who do you want to be when you grow up? Who are some adults you want to emulate? And teach kids to look ahead and say, is this going to help me toward that goal, or is this going to divert me away to a negative goal?
So we'll be discussing this next time. Maura, do you have any thoughts on TikTok at the moment?
I was going to give you a very quick response as well. I'm not on TikTok, although I've looked at several TikTok episodes. They're quick, and in my case, the ones I get seem to be quite informative in a short period of time. But what I want to, my observation compared to what you're describing about what they allow for children in China is that China focuses on education. We may like them, we may not like them. We don't we may not like communism, which I don't. However, huge differential. If you even look at things like YouTube, and you look what is literally fed to the American public, it's inanity. That's the word I'd use. It is not information. It's primarily inanity. Sometimes it's the lowest form of, if you want to call it, entertainment. So if we are, as a culture, feeding garbage and a lack of value and a lack of learning and a lack of higher oriented concepts to children, and we don't have anywhere else where children are going and they're being exposed to higher level thinking, then we're going to end up with a next generation of, now this sounds very extreme, but like degenerate people that really don't have any goals in mind.
Lori?
Okay, so I got a lot to say about TikTok. I've kind of stayed away from it. The only time I do go on, I was at the hospital with my son for like 4 hours, and I was on TikTok for the first time, and 4 hours went by like that. So that TikTok, you think about a clock, tick, tock, tick, tock, right? What do? You waste time, tick, tock, tick, tock. So it sucks you in, and it gives you the information, and it keeps you there. But I have heard, while Americans are, or while China is building an army of very smart youth, we are turning our kids into marshmallows that just watch things and don't have an opinion. So China can march in here and take over, and everyone will go, oh, okay. Like almost like we're hypnotized, right? So that's where the TikTok to me is really offensive. But I will say, I do spend a lot of time watching little kitty videos or lost deer or deer trap videos on TikTok. So I'm like, they're very short and they're very to the point, and I just sob. And, but is it good? I know my 14-year-old, 16-year-old watches it all the time, and he wastes so much time. And I have to tell him to get off. And he's like, I'm not on TikTok. And I know he is, because I can monitor it. And I don't know how to turn off that one. I don't know how to turn off that one app or avoid that one app on his phone. I wish there was a parent monitor that I could just control the apps on his phone.
We'll talk about that, because that's may be happening. But you remember in the early days of the computer world, we had this phrase, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. That seems what TikTok is about at the moment. And you're right, Diane, it's the internet as well. I mean, it's not as if TikTok is the only one. It's a manifestation of what's been going on with the internet and YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. It's the ability for us as adults and as parents to, first of all, model for other people, and to enable them to ask questions of themselves, because otherwise they won't, and they will be marshmallows, and marshmallows are easy to defeat. So on that high note, I must say to you again, from thousands of people around the world, how much we appreciate you making the time. Wonderful Dr. Diane Medved and fabulous Maura Sweeney, wondrous Lori McDermott, and your humble host, Barry Shore. We will do of course, our hug and our blessing for everybody. Hug stands for heartfelt, unlimited giving. So on the count of three, if you please, 1, 2, 3. And our blessing is go forth, live exuberantly, spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad, go make a difference. Bye.
Bye.
Let's see here.
Oh, damn. I can't close it. Bye, Barry.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Diane.
You're welcome.
Well, that's too funny. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Shaw, we have an issue.
One moment. I have an issue. I can't. My computer is not responding.
Oh, take it easy on it. Don't give it too many commands. It's gonna freeze. One command at a time.
It's not responding.
Yeah, just be patient with it. One command at a time, sir.
Okay, one moment. Connected. And